Your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. This is the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we explore ways to build resilience, build confidence, and make our minds work in our favor. We draw from the fields of psychology and life design to help us intentionally create a rock-solid mindset upon which a vibrant life experience can be built. My name is April Seifert. I'm a psychologist, a life design strategist, and co-founder of Peak Mind, the Center for Psychological Strength. Each week, I'll introduce you to an expert, a concept, a technique, or a hands-on practice that will help you build psychological strength in your own life. These are the tools to help you thrive. Hey everyone, welcome to this very special bonus episode of the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April Seifert and I'm your host, and I am releasing this bonus episode in conjunction with an interview that I recently conducted with Dr. Stephen Hayes. He is the founder of something called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, and I'm releasing this bonus episode, something that I have never done before, because something happened during my interview with Dr. Hayes that had an incredibly profound impact on me. Now, this happened in the latter half of the interview, and it ended up being a fairly long interview. And the impact that it was essentially an exercise that Dr. Hayes led us through during that interview. That exercise had such a profound impact in me that I didn't want to risk that, someone might not have time to listen to that entire episode and not hear that exercise. And the importance of everyone having access to the exercise that Dr. Hayes led us through during that interview is what's leading me to create this special bonus episode that I'm releasing in conjunction with my full interview with Dr. Stephen Hayes. Now, of course, I hope that you will listen to that entire interview because it is such a powerful, valuable episode of this podcast. But minimally, if you only have a few moments, I would urge you to spend some quiet time listening to the exercise that is this excerpt of that interview and actually do the exercise. Now, in a moment, I'll tell you a little bit about Dr. Hayes, and then in a moment, I'm going to play that exercise. Listen to the very end, and I'll talk to you a little bit afterward about what happened to me during that exercise, because I want you to understand the degree to which this just shifted some things for me. A bit about Dr. Hayes. Dr. Stephen Hayes, I've mentioned, he is the founder of Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. Here's what you need to understand about that. That treatment modality is what is unseating some of the most, powerful treatment modalities, things like cognitive behavioral therapy and other things that clinical psychologists have been using for years. This is proving to be much more effective than those types of treatment to help people with things like anxiety and depression and other sorts of, mental health issues that they might have. So Dr. Hayes invented acceptance and commitment therapy. He is also the 30th most impactful psychologist in the world right now. Take that in for a second. Think about how many psychologists there are in the world. He's number 30. That's amazing. Not only that, but he is one of the most highly cited scientists, like of all science. He's one of the most highly cited scientists in the world right now. And he's the author of a book called A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Toward What Matters. The thing to know about acceptance and commitment therapy as we go into this episode or into this exercise that I'm about to have you listen to is that acceptance and commitment therapy does not tell us that we need to fix our problems in order to live our lives. Rather, it tells us that life is a process that we should live, including the pieces that are painful and traumatic and difficult. And not only that, but we should lean into that pain and that trauma, because that pain and trauma is indicative of something that is a more fundamental, foundational desire and motivation that we have. You'll hear that in this exercise coming up, And I'll tell you a bit about what that meant for me again when this is done. You'll learn so much more about Dr. Hayes if you listen to his full episode. I highly suggest you do, but if you only have a few minutes, please sit down and go through this exercise that Dr. Stephen Hayes led us through in his full interview. All right, no more stalling. Let's get to it.
Think of something that really brings you down, that's painful, like a kind of thing that shows up in your mind that in the middle of the night wakes you up, and it's just old and hard and sticky and filled with pain and struggle. And just think of something like that. It could be a memory, a thought, a feeling, or usually it'd be all those things glued together. Now, look around. Nobody's watching you. If you're in a place where you got some privacy, imagine that you're a sculptor and your body is the statue that you're sculpting, and you're going to have people walk through a sculpture garden and they're going to see your outsides. And what I want you to do is put your body in a shape of you at your worst when dealing with that issue, so that from the outside, if somebody saw it, they'd get a little bit of a sense of what it's like to be you on the inside when it's you at your worst dealing with whatever that issue is that you just settled on. And then take a little mental snapshot. If you can actually do it, it'll help, even though it feels a little odd. If nobody's watching, I mean, you're only embarrassing yourself. So really, you can do this. And then now come back to your normal posture, but then put your body in the shape of the statue that shows you at your best with that same issue. Because there are times when you handle that in ways that you know or allow you to move forward in life in ways that are better than the posture you just showed. So show me your posture with you at your best when dealing with that same issue. Don't change the issue. And actually put your body in that shape. And then take a little mental snapshot. We've actually done this. Now you can come back to your normal thing. Let me tell you what we find. We've done this around the world. We have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of people doing this exact thing with these exact instructions. Here's what happens, you at your worst. Your head comes down, your eyes close, your arms and hands come in, or if they don't come in, your fists go clenched as if you're in a fight. You tend to buckle at the middle. Your legs come in. You may assume a fetal position. You may actually flop to the floor. What are you showing with that? I think you're showing that when you defend yourself, or when you fight, or when you flop, you fail. And that little set of processes are unhelpful to you. But if you look at your body and how you put it into a position with you at your best for that same issue, I bet you your head came up. I bet you your eyes came open. Your arms and hands probably went out. Maybe your fists unclenched. Well, what's the metaphor there? I bring my consciousness to the moment. My hands are free to move. I can do things with them. If you were you might even, we have pictures of people standing up with their legs apart, like almost like this powerful, like superhero kind of. Well, here's what is in a liberated mind. If you are able to open up to your own chatter and pain and bodily sensations, etc. In other words, to treat your insides in a way where your head still gets to be held high and your eyes open, metaphorically, that you can actually see it and be with it in a way that's open. And then if you can allocate attention consciously to what's of importance, metaphorically, like putting your head in a place where you can move and look at what's important, not just looking at the underside of your eyelids or your belly button as you cringe down and do a defensive posture. And if you can move then towards the things that you care about and actually do something around that, and metaphorically have your hands free to reach out, to touch, to do, to change what's of importance there, life opens up. So you already know the answers. The problem is that you've got a problem-solving mind that doesn't. I asked you to pick something that would be hard for you, and then these two different postures showed up. If you'd be willing to sort of just think about that thing you thought about, I said I'd think of anything that was really painful and difficult. See if you can dig down to a single sentence of you at your worst, the kind of things that show up in your mind when you're being led astray, when you're being pulled into this defended place. And then I want you to think about how old you were when you first had thoughts that were like that. I bet you they include something about your self-adequacy, or whether or not you're lovable, or what kind of person you are, or whether the world's safe, but something. Take it as young as you can. And then take this thing you struggle with, that we've put into a sentence, like I'm a person who, the kind of wagging finger that your mind tends to give you about yourself. Picture yourself at that age. I asked how young you could go. Get as young as you can. Put that person mentally in front of you. That person called you as a younger age. And then say that sentence, but in the voice of the child. Have that child say to you that sentence, that self-critical sentence, like, I'm unlovable. But actually, if you're in a room where you can get away with it, say it in the child's voice. Or, I'm not good enough. Or, deep down there's something wrong with me. Or, I don't know what it is. But take the time to actually picture the kid saying that. What would you do if you're actually in that situation? If a kid at that age were talking that way to you, talking the way you talk to yourself when it's just between your ears, what would you actually do if you were? My guess is you're not going to slap the kid. You're probably going to do something compassionate, yeah? And my question to you is, when did you hit the age where you no longer deserved what you would give to yourself even as a child? You're probably going to listen. You're probably going to hug the kid. Could you do that to the person in the mirror? Could you treat yourself with the same kind of kindness and compassion that you'd treat a young person who is saying the same thing? And you notice how much harder that is. You get in front of the person in the mirror, and man, the wagging finger of blame and shame and criticism and inadequacy just boom shows up as if you can be whipped into health or something, or whipped in, browbeaten into strength. That's not what happens. So that's a kind of little mental example. There's a flip side to this too. Let me ask you this. If you take that sentence, whatever it is, whatever you came up with, imagine that you wrote it on a piece of paper. And what the mind tells you to do is that your life is going to go well when you get rid of what's on that sheet of the paper. But, the nervous system doesn't have a delete button or an erase button. So if it's written, just as an example, will you ever in your life, as long as your brain is still intact, not be able to remember yourself as a young person with thoughts like that? No. So you're going to carry it to your grave, right? Short of brain injury, you're carrying it to your grave. Okay, so we've written down on a sheet of paper here. Our mind's telling us we can only live when we get rid of it and erase it, but there's no eraser. Here's what I want you to notice. This mental thing that tells you to erase it, burn it, tear it up, throw it away, has a cost. Flip over the paper mentally, and right on that side, what the now invisible sentence suggests you deeply care about, want, or yearn for, what you value. Okay, now here's the deal. I'll give you a devil's bargain. You can throw away that piece of paper, but you're going to throw away both sides. You can do it. I don't mean that many people want to do that. They want the bargain of a one-sided sheet of paper where you get to throw away the pain, but you won't throw away what's on the other side, which is the purpose and the yearning, that you wanted something.
All right, guys, there you have it. That exercise that Dr. Hayes just led us all through was so profound for me when I was doing this interview. And if you actually sat down and did the exercise, you probably understand why I had to take the time to create this bonus episode because the entire world needs to go through that exercise to understand the connection between the pain that we feel and what it's signaling to us that our true values are. Now, at the beginning of this episode, I said that I would talk a little bit about what happened to me during the taping of that interview. So let me give you a little bit of a download on that. I'm going to cry because I just am. It was so profound. It's just going to happen. So I have an issue that I've been struggling with for a number of years, and I've been pretty open with it on the podcast. I had very severe postpartum depression after my first daughter was born. And as a result of that, things have been really interesting because the depression is gone, the anxiety is gone, but what has lingered is what I would consider very similar to PTSD in terms of certain situations, specifically when I'm now with my second daughter, putting her to sleep at night, and she's not going to bed, and my husband is working that evening, and she isn't going to bed, and I don't know how long I'm going to have to keep going in trying to put her to sleep because I don't have any help. Those situations, nighttime, being alone, baby's crying, she's not going to sleep, don't know how long it's going to last. Those factors are very triggering for me, and I have panic attacks. And I've been working on this for an extremely long time. I'm actually seeing a counselor right now trying to figure all of this out. So that's important because I talk about this issue on a weekly basis. So when Dr. Hayes started going through this exercise, I was like, okay, I'm going to follow along with this. Oh, sure. What's something that I'm struggling with that's really difficult for me, that's kind of shameful and hard to admit? Okay, it's this. It's these panic attacks. And I went there accidentally because I talk about it so often in the therapy sessions that I'm going to that I thought I was safe. I thought that I could get through this exercise unscathed. I didn't think it would impact me because I talk about it so often. So he, asked us all to envision what that, difficult thing is. And I assumed the posture that he, said that I would. I was closed down, my head was down, my eyes were closed. I had, was kind of hugging myself. My arms were closed over my body. And then when he said, oh, this is hard. When he said to think about the youngest you can remember being, actually, let me back up. When he said, what is the sentence that you think when that's happening, right? What's the sentence that goes through your mind when you're at your worst in that situation? The sentence that goes through my mind is, I'm alone and there's no one here to support me. So that's what I'm saying to myself. And that in and of itself was not enough to bring me to my knees because I say that sentence and I talk about that a ton with my therapist. Here's where it got dodgy. When he asked us to think about how, the youngest that we were when we remember feeling like that, I've never made this connection before. This memory has never popped into my mind. I mean, it hasn't for decades and decades, but certainly not in the context of these panic attacks that I have. This is not easy. The image that popped into my mind, I was 10 years old and I was in my room and it was nighttime and I was alone and I was crying because my dad was dying and I was afraid to cry and be too emotional around everyone else because everyone else was already so sad. I didn't want to make it worse. And I remembered feeling very alone, not because there weren't people to support me. My mom would have in an instant, but because I was afraid to make things worse for her and other people. So the bottom line was I grieved alone a lot. And picturing myself as a 10-year-old girl losing a parent and saying those things, I'm alone and there's no one here to support me. I mean, that just changed everything about the way that I think about these panic attacks. It was so profound. And so if you've done this exercise, I hope that it was as helpful and as impactful for you. And the second piece that was so helpful for me was when he said, okay, so you've got the one side of the sheet of paper, right? I'm alone and there's no one here to support me. And what does that tell you? That you value. And that connection to someone else who I trust with my deepest, darkest feelings is something that I really value. Isn't that amazing? So, apologies for being so emotional, but it was such a profound experience that I had to create this bonus episode because, as I mentioned, the world needs to go through that exercise. If you have trauma or something difficult, that you're dealing with, even if it's just you're being self-critical about your performance or how you're, showing up in your day-to-day life, whatever it is, I urge you to go through this exercise fully give yourself over to it. Because holy cow, the gift that I got from doing that, that's priceless. So as I mentioned, I had to share this. A giant thank you to Dr. Stephen Hayes for being on the podcast with us. I can't tell you how much that meant. And I'm a bit now into his book, A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Toward What Matters. And it is so impactful. I would urge you to go grab a copy of that book. All right, you guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope you found value in this exercise, and I hope that my own personal story gives you just a little bit of freedom and a little bit of permission to go there for yourself. Because if you do, I promise the value you're going to get out of it and the insight you'll get out of it, it's so profound and it's just priceless. All right, guys, I hope you have a great week. And I will see you next week for another amazing interview. Bye, guys.